Chief Sustainability Officer at PepsiCo. Black History Month and the opportunity to highlight the excellence of our Black community is one that will greatly impact our school's community. We invite you to celebrate with us the upcoming Black History Month initiatives, ranging from educational programming to social activities. A link will now be dropped in the chat, so if you haven't already, be sure to click. Today's conversation will be facilitated by Professor Modupe Akinola, Associate Professor of Management and Faculty Director of the Sanford Bernstein Center for Leadership and Ethics. I personally had the honor of being taught by Professor Akinola during my first year, and I can say there's really no warmer welcome to CBS than to see a Black woman as your professor. She has continued to be a driving force throughout my career and a really big reason why I feel so comfortable and empowered here. And also I have to say, it's so cool to welcome another HBCU alum, Jason, and really excited again for today's conversation. Professor Akinola and Jason will discuss Jason's time as a student here, his career path, leadership and equity and sustainability. So right now, I'll pass it over to Professor Akinola.
Thank you, Jeannie. And it was an honor and privilege to teach you and your classmates. Always brings me so much joy to be in the classroom with all of you. And it brings me joy to be here today talking to you, Jason. And I'm so excited to be a part of this event. You all already heard his title, Senior Vice President, Chief Sustainability Officer for PepsiCo Beverages North America. He's a 12-year Pepsi veteran and leads their efforts to deliver long-term sustainability targets across the full beverage portfolio. He is also a CBS grad, class of 05, as you saw from the intro, and he is a Morehouse man. So my first question for you, Jason, is before you experienced all this like C-suite, fancy title, Morehouse man, CBS, whatever, you are somebody's son, brother, uncle. What would your family say? Who would your family say you are, actually? How would they define? What are 3 words that you think they would use to describe you?
So, Modupe, let me start by saying it's a pleasure to be here. I was ecstatic when I got the invitation to present to or during Black History Month at Columbia. I may not give you the first 3 words because some of them coming from my family are not afternoon appropriate for Columbia Business School. But I would say they would tell you I'm competitive, I'm driven, and I'm compassionate, right? Those are the ones I'd want to share, right? There are a few others that they might bring in. But, you know, I grew up just south, I guess just north of Columbia in Yonkers, New York. And, you know, my parents instilled in me and my siblings this idea of work really hard, embrace challenges, right? Take some risk in your life, but also never forget where you came from, right? And you have a responsibility to help somebody else along the way. So, yeah, that's what I try to live. And as you said, right, I've met some degree of success academically and professionally, but I never forget where I came from. I never forget my connection to communities like Yonkers, communities like Morehouse or Columbia. And I try to use my platform and my voice to create a pathway for someone else. So that's, I guess, a little glimpse into who I am pre all the titles you mentioned.
Thank you. Now, when you first off, you just mentioned how happy you are to be here and speak during Black History Month, and so I want to actually take you back to 2005, your second year at CBS, February. And, you know, I'm taking you back in another way, which is I want to tell you the Billboard top 5 hits at that time, just to get you really in the moment. We Belong Together by Mariah Carey, Holla Back Girl, Gwen Stefani, Let Me Love You by Mario, Since You've Been Gone, Kelly Clarkson, 1-2 Step by Sierra. And I can't help but add the 6th, which was Gold Digger with Kanye and Jamie Foxx. So imagine yourself, February 2005. Those are some of the tunes that are being played, and it's Black History Month. What was on your mind at that time? How did you view Black History Month then? And do you even have any recollection of the types of things you might have done for Black History Month as a student?
Yeah, so Madupe, I was probably in one of the more fortunate positions in the February of my second year in business school because I already had a full-time job, right? And I've spoken about this before with BBSA. I was coming back to my second year with a full-time offer to join an investment bank. I had the great advice from a professor who said, "Hey, start your career there, but certainly look at opportunities outside of banking. It's just not the place where you're going to find the most fulfillment and reach your highest level of contribution." So Black History Month, I was probably chilling more than most, right? I wasn't listening to many of those. I was probably listening to number 6 on that list more than the top 5. I'll just be really, really candid. But I would say the thing that probably stuck out with me for the duration of my 2 years at Columbia was we're a small yet tight group of Black executives, and at that time, students aspiring to be executives. And if we don't have each other's back, right, then there's something wrong. If I can't do something to help somebody else out, there's something wrong. So I was probably spending a little time thinking about that. I was also really spending a lot of time figuring out how I was going to make real impact early on in my career that would afford me the opportunity to give back over the duration of my career. And I think, yeah, as I give advice, right, and anyone who will listen to it, this idea of being expert and adding inordinate value buys you the opportunity to impact the lives of others, right? Like organizations want to know you can deliver the bacon, right? And then you get the opportunity to contribute in other ways. So that's probably how I was spending my February. The other thing I was doing was I was on class, I guess it's called class council, and I was leading the class gift campaign. So I was spending a lot of time getting to know my peers and asking them to make gifts to the school in the name of our class. So, happy to talk about that a little bit more. But that's what comes to mind for me with respect to how I spent my Black History Month, my second year.
And you mentioned helping others out. Any examples of ways in which you did that on campus with other classmates?
I think it's probably more instructive to tell you how people did it for me, because my background coming to Columbia was not the traditional banking, consulting, corporate background. I had kind of a more non-traditional background coming into Columbia. So whether it was, my classmates who had spent time in banking, helping me get through, early accounting classes, corporate finance classes, those who helped me prepare for interviews on Wall Street, given my background was non-traditional. So it was more about this community that was willing to support me. And I think those investments in me are why I feel the responsibility to make investments in others, right? So I'm sure if you asked other people, they would say I made contributions in them, but I think it's more instructive to talk about what people did for me, because those are the things I hold most dear.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And now, as you think of Black History Month, how has your perspective changed, or even how you think about and celebrate Black History Month? And we see your background, which I'm assuming is not on every month of the year. Tell us more about that. And
yes, yeah. So this is a background inside of PepsiCo during Black History Month. We have a whole suite of these backgrounds. Some of the others reference what we call slogan for Black History Month. It's a movement, not a moment, right? We try to embrace that. And if you think about the history of PepsiCo going back to the first corporate vice president in the US, being at PepsiCo, first Black interns hired at a company at PepsiCo, and you think about the trajectory that this company has been on, this is part of who and what we are. And then the commitments we made in 2020 with respect to diversity, equity, or diversity and equality, and putting real metrics behind what we want to go and accomplish as a company, investments we want to make in partners and businesses of people who look like you and I, right? This company is really, charting a new course and leading the way. For me personally, Black History Month has a slightly different tone to it now, given that I have two children. I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old. And I don't want them to feel like their history is confined to 1 out of 12 months, right? Mm-hmm. I want them to fully embrace the fact that their history is American history. There are so many parts of American history that are not possible without the contribution of Black Americans. And let's call it like it is. Many of those Black Americans were not here through choice of their own, yet and still they made history, right? And so I think about it as let's embrace this time of year, but let's also find ways to infuse our history and our teaching of that history more broadly than just the month that the academic calendar, the corporate calendar kind of defines as the time to talk about it, right? And for me, that takes the form of educating them, but also like when I've got a group of boys in the car and we're going to a basketball game and they don't all look like my son, like we're going to talk about stuff that my son probably says, Dad, why do you always have to bring something up? But I know, I look at him and I see the pride when he realizes he's part of the overall American narrative, not an asterisk in that narrative. And the same for my 7-year-old daughter.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just to me such a reminder that we don't have to just do that with our kids, but also with our classmates, with the people that we are around on a regular basis. Could you translate that into some of the ways in which you do that or help educate others in the workspace?
Yeah.
About EI and other types of topics?
Yeah, I'm going to make it really tactical here. And I think you got to point to the stats, right? McKinsey talks about top quartile companies that set diversity as central to what they do, and they achieve diversity in their senior leadership. They outperform those in the bottom quartile, right? So you got to start with, there's a business case for why diversity matters, right? And why diversity drives performance and results. The second thing I would say is I'm uncompromising in the fact that we will look like the communities in which we operate, any team that I lead. And that's not just race, that's gender, that's difference of ability. And that is not a quiet conversation I have. It's an overt conversation I have with people who work for me who are hiring for roles. It's an overt conversation I have with human resources to say we will not look like the typical organization that has not understood and accepted the fact that diversity drives better performance. We will look different, right? And I encourage people to evaluate me on every exit from every role that I have at PepsiCo on did we move the needle on making the team I was leading more diverse. And you talked about the role I'm in today. I've led many teams across PepsiCo, and I can say, go do the forensic audit, right? We've moved the needle, right? And what I think that does is it starts to create very organic conversations amongst people in the organization that say, we're now a more diverse team. So the discussion and the dialogue amongst this team is different, right? When you have a leader who shows up with this background, right? it drives a different conversation. Last year, it was I had a background that was very anchored in MLK, and the conversations that I had and the people who reached out to say, hey, I want to learn more. Like it's about opening the door and inviting people to have honest dialogue, as opposed to it's always like I'm pushing it or imposing a dialogue on you, right? So it's about creating more diverse environments that lead to richer, more diverse conversations and connections. And then I think the final thing I do want to point out is this idea of being an ally to others also makes people want to understand your story as well, right? And I happen to work for someone who's an amazing boss of mine and an amazing executive, also a Columbia Business School alum, and Jim is Asian. And I was completely ignorant to violence towards Asians, Asian hate in this country, that it existed before what we hear about and read about today. I've been educated on that, and I know I'm more sensitive to different people's plight, and my role is to be an ally and advocate for those people as well, right? But by doing that, it also opens up, again, this two-way dialogue of people want to understand the story of people who are different than them.
Yeah, I call that diversity consciousness, where you're to like add this lens around all types of categories of diversity to whatever you do. I want to probe a little bit deeper in terms of your making your teams more diverse and representative of the environment around. And we all aspire to do that. And there are some pain points along the way. Curious if you could share a pain point or moment where you had to have some real honest conversation, because you mentioned that is a piece of this, having real and honest conversations. Any examples that come to mind of where you had to say, hey, let's keep this real here?
Yeah, I talk about this one a lot, right? And this is going to seem like very simple, but when I saw it happen multiple times, I said, this is at the core of what gets in the way. And it's this idea of, and anyone who's been in a room where big decisions are being made about talent, when the discussion goes to, we need to build a more diverse team, we need to build a more inclusive culture, there's always this line that says, we need to get more comfortable with taking risk, okay? So I am now defined as the risky choice, as opposed to the accomplished, proven executive who is entitled to, that's not the right word, I'm not entitled to, has earned the opportunity to be in the consideration set in the discussion. The hard conversation is challenging that in the room and getting people to understand how this idea of getting more women into roles, paying women an equitable wage, that's risk. Whereas a majority male is, we're going to stretch them, right? We're going to give them this opportunity to really get a stretch assignment, get a new assignment. So that is real. That discussion happens, right? And I view it as essential to my role, to challenge that thinking, to challenge that dialogue, because behind that comment is story after story after story that says, I don't know if they really drove the results. Was it really them, or did they go into the role and get the tailwinds of someone who was who preceded them in a role? Or if I go in and my first 3 to 6 months are somewhat challenged, see, we told you it was a risk, right? We didn't give Jason a coach to onboard. We knew it was risky. We told you he wasn't. Well, why'd you give the other person the onboarding support to make sure that first 3 to 6 months was a success? Like, these are the things that happen, right? And what I would say is, I happen to work for a company where it is safe to have that conversation
Mhm.
and to challenge that thinking, right? As I said, this company's been at this for a very, very long time. I say that with a tremendous amount of pride in PepsiCo relative to what I see and know to be true in other organizations where it's not necessarily safe to have the conversation. And many times these comments are not intentional. It's unconscious bias, right? And in other organizations, it's not okay to challenge the unconscious bias. I firmly believe that the reception I've gotten over time is thank you for pointing that out.
Mhm.
You help us figure out how to be better, right? So I feel fortunate to be at a place where that is the tone, as opposed to like bury your head in the sand as if it's not happening.
Yep. Roll your eyes in the meeting and wait till afterwards when there are other people of color and you can be like, did you hear that, sir? You can actually kind of say that. Now, you said, fortunate to be at Pepsi. You haven't always been there. You began
Mhm.
your career in finance. When did you realize, well, A, I'm curious about that environment and the idea that it takes time sometimes to have license to have these conversations.
Mhm.
But then I also want to talk more about your decision to carve out a space in sustainability. I mean, now we're all talking about sustainability. Everyone's like, oh, ESG, all that. But you've been at this for a while. When did you become interested? How was that transition? Because as you know, we have several students in the audience or who are listening and want to get to this space, but are also in that skills game too. So curious
Yeah.
about the journey.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but you're right. I started in finance, went to PepsiCo, and this I think relates back to what would my family say about me. The one word I didn't use because I don't know if they would say it, but I've always aspired to lead, right? And that was student government before college. That was student government at Morehouse. It was in my fraternity. I played tennis at Morehouse, was co-captain. Like, so leading was always something that I was interested in, right? And even, going to banking, I knew that I didn't think I wanted to be an MD. I wanted to be a CEO, right? And banking was the pathway to give me some skills, as you said, people in skill development that would allow me to make this transition to a company like PepsiCo. And the transition to sustainability, Modupe, is one where, and I've talked about this a lot in the last year and a half. I think there will be people who have careers in sustainability because they are particularly interested in a piece of sustainability, whether it's climate science, water, agriculture, you name it, right? They will be expert practitioners at a thing. And I think Columbia is leading the way in this other path, which is we will all be responsible for embedding sustainability in the organizations we're a part of and we lead. And I call that competence in sustainability. So the two pathways are careers in sustainability and competence in sustainability.
Yeah.
I don't believe you will have leaders, irrespective of functional area of expertise or like your pure GMs, who will be credible leaders in the foreseeable future who aren't able to see their business through the lens of sustainability.
Yeah.
So what drew me to it was the long-term aspiration that I have for myself and understanding that this is an area I need to get very comfortable with, not only because it's top of mind and a hot topic right now, but because it will be core and central to leaders of the future being able to navigate the waters of sustainability for their respective businesses. Some of that is, kind of stakeholder engagement that's going to be required. It's going to be reputational risk, but really what it is can you operate a business within planetary boundaries, create growth, and drive value with sustainability kind of as an anchor to all that, right? An anchoring point. And we rolled out a program, PepsiCo Positive, back in the fall of 2021 that really outlines this end-to-end transformation of PepsiCo with sustainability at the center. And it's all about how do we create value and growth through three primary pillars being positive agriculture, positive value chain, and positive choices. I won't unpack all of that then right now, but that's the draw to me. I probably won't do sustainability for the duration of my career, but I will forever be changed as a leader, having done this role and gotten close to this sustainability agenda.
So tell me, say more about this. You won't necessarily be doing that for all of your career. What do you envision? And part of the reason I'm asking this question is, you have done a lot of different things, whether it's going from finance to strategy to sales to customer management to sustainability. What is your perspective on your career path and what you've wanted in these different stages, and how has that served you well?
I wish I could tell you that there was this very clear and linear progression of things I wanted to get out, but I didn't. I don't have that, right? My career has been marked by a couple things. The first was, and I said this earlier, I always wanted to lead, and leadership to me was, can you get to a large GM job leading a business, right? And I thought PepsiCo was a place to do that. That was kind of the overarching theme I was marching towards, and I was flexible with the organization to say, present me with really challenging opportunities, right? Complex problems that others might be running away from, and I'm going to run towards it, right? Because I always believe the way to build my personal brand. I won't impose that thinking on everyone. My way of creating value is solve complex problems and run to challenges, right? For some people, that's not their comfort zone. Yeah. That was always the place where I thought I could create unique value. The other thing I said was, I want to lead people, right? I fundamentally believe in, unlocking value through, as we talked about, building diverse teams, building engaged teams, setting long-term vision, and keeping people on a course to deliver that. These steps along the way were basically PepsiCo saying, here's where we think we need you, and me saying, okay, I'll sign up for that, right? We met at an intersection of mutual opportunity and benefit and reward. Had you asked me 10 years ago, would I be leading sustainability for the North American beverage business? My answer would have been no. But when the opportunity presented itself and I put on a piece of paper, opportunities, risks, as I told you, risk was a part of my upbringing, right? Take risks, be willing to do what other people aren't willing to do. You then can create, unique value in the marketplace. And before you know it, you then have, let me make it personal. I looked around and I had this unique set of experiences and skills that differentiated me from my peer set, right? And what the future holds, I don't know. I hope a lot more, but I never really spend a lot of time obsessing about what the next thing or the next two things are going to be. I want to deliver great value and be able to articulate a story of, what I can contribute to PepsiCo in the future.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because I do think that when you're in business school, there's okay, this is the path and this is the plan. But as soon as you leave, one of the things I hear you saying, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is be open and be curious, because you plan everything. Like, life until business school is pretty planned, but afterwards, if you're open, opportunity will find you, which is what it sounds like. Now you made me smile because you said you've always wanted to be a leader. I teach leadership, and I think that's a very important thing. So I'm curious about your perception of leadership at CBS when you were there versus now. How has it changed over your career?
Drastically. And I think you kind of touched on the thing that I think is most different CBS to where I am today. Throughout my career, and I would argue for many people, we hit these life stages where different things become more and less important, right? So I talked about joining PepsiCo. I was dating a super woman at the time. And I said to PepsiCo, you know what I want to do long-term, give me the best, most challenging opportunity. And literally you tell me on Friday, I'd be there Monday. I then asked that same woman to marry me. And there were certain things that came off the table for us, right? So now I'm managing a career of partnership as opposed to a career of an individual. Fast forward to we have our first child, and that's another life stage. So one of the fundamental changes in my outlook on leadership, business school to where I am today, is life events change people, generally for the better. And as a leader, I have to make it okay for people to express what's changed in their lives, right? That has changed what their expectations of next job, future jobs, geography, like we got to make room for people to have these conversations. And I think as a Black executive, I understand uniquely how sometimes we don't feel really comfortable saying all of that, right? I don't necessarily have all the confidence to tell you Mexico City is really not going to work, because if that's the one thing that's going to get me to where I want to go, I don't necessarily have the self-confidence, right? It's self-confidence to take something off the table that in this idea of the family unit doesn't work for us anymore. So what we do is we don't say it, then we come home, we have the hard conversation at home, go through the toil of interpersonal dynamics, and then we end up like wrestling with these things. So it's a long way for me to say the thing that's changed for me most fundamentally is I lead people. I don't lead assets. I don't lead human capital. Like I lead people. And this idea of understanding people's stories, people's background, what's important, what childhood experience leads this person to say they're not, ready for leadership, but this other person's always believed they were a leader. Therefore, they're showing up in different ways. And what do I need to do to help, the woman who's not really taking her seat at the table realize she's the baddest person in the room and needs to like step up, right? Like those are fundamental things I hadn't thought about as leadership before I lived these experiences. I'd say the other thing is, I know that my leadership today is not going to be my leadership of tomorrow. And I have to embrace growth. I have to embrace imperfection. And I've got to embrace new ways of leading in the future.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that, because one of the things you said captures one of the things we talk about in LEAD, that different people need different things at different times. And if you understand that about your employees, they will be so motivated because you understand their fundamental needs and how they change. And you've also said something that I think we all often forget to do and don't have license to do as people of color, honoring our truth. And if your truth is that Mexico City might not work for you and your family, honor it, because the things down the line might not be so wonderful. So thank you for sharing that wisdom and those insights. I've heard you mention that you learned a lot from management professor Michael Feiner, who taught high performance leadership, I believe. Tell me more about that relationships and how can students kind of find their champion at CBS? What did you do to develop that relationship?
So I consider Professor Feiner still a friend, mentor. What many people may not know about him is he was also the CHRO of Pepsi back in his career. So he knew the organization I would ultimately end up at. And the relationship started because we had an intro to leadership like it was a mini course when we first started. I don't know if the school still does that, but my cluster had him, and the truth and candor that he delivered in, I think it was like 2 weeks that we were with him. I said, this is a person I need to get to know and I want to learn from, right? And he was completely wide open and willing to do that. The other thing that I give Professor Feiner a tremendous amount of credit for is his willingness to grapple with this idea of diversity, this idea of equity, this idea of people having voice, because he lived it, right? And as I said, right, PepsiCo is a company that's been dealing with this for a very long time. So I'm sure he has practical experiences from his time at the company. And he brought that to the forefront. He didn't try to pretend that didn't exist. And he was candid about it, right? And how do you find your champion? You open up, be a little vulnerable, right? Be willing to ask for help, be willing to ask for perspective. And I don't mean go and bare your soul, right? This idea of vulnerability doesn't mean show everything. It means show enough that people can start to understand what's in here, what's the core of who you are. And I did that with Professor Feiner over the course of 2 years in business school. He also used to put dinner with him and his wife up for auction at the BBSA auction. I and a classmate of mine bid on that and went and spent an evening with he and his wife. So I got to know him a little bit more and he got to know me a little bit more. And I'll tell you a funny story about Professor Feiner. I was leaving Credit Suisse. I had an offer to join PepsiCo in corporate strategy and development. And I reached out to him and I said, I want you to help me think through if this is the right role, this is the right place. Can I be successful here? He may not remember this, but he initially told me, no, don't take the job. He said, I know the group. He said, I know the profile of people. He said, you're smart. You're as smart as anybody in the group, but I don't think it plays to your hip pocket skill. He said, I think PepsiCo would be a company where you'd be really successful, but I just don't think this is the right role and the right group. And I respectfully said, thank you for your advice. But I'm gonna take it, right? I'm gonna go. And it's funny, every time I get a new assignment, reach a new milestone, he's probably one of the first people on LinkedIn to congratulate me and send a note, kind of celebrating my success. So yeah, he's a unique and special individual. And like I said, I still consider him a friend and a mentor.
I love that. Now, you kind of mentioned the importance of knowing your core. And I'm going to take this more to a physical core, which is our core at Columbia Business School has kind of changed because we are now on a new campus, 2 beautiful buildings, totally different feel in Manhattanville. And one of the key aspects of this new space is being able to support the local community. And I'm curious to hear more about what you've done and what's at the core of sustainability, community, and equity with the work that you're doing at PepsiCo and that PepsiCo does.
Yeah, happy to unpack what we're doing through what we're calling the racial equality journey, and that's across 2 big cohorts in the U.S. or demographics in the U.S. Black Americans and Hispanic Americans. And that's about investing in businesses run by those people. That's providing mentorship and leadership development for those folks. It's so inspiring, right, to see what we're doing in the space. I'm going to challenge kind of the premise though a little bit and say Columbia may be in Manhattanville, as an alum of the school and someone who's from New York and has a connection to the Harlem community. Columbia's in Harlem now, right? And I think one of the things that allows companies, institutions to build real connection with communities is you've got to meet the community where they are. You can't try to, as the institution or the corporation, try to redefine what the community is, right? It's incumbent upon us to meet the community where they are, understand the unique aspects of and qualities of a community. And I mean community in a physical sense. I also mean community in the cultural sense, right? Harlem means something in the world, right? And Columbia, its students need to embrace that and connect with that, as opposed to trying to redefine. And you know, I don't lead the business school, so you know, I'm not in a position to tell the school how to connect and engage. I'm giving my perspective. You know, we've got a moniker within PepsiCo North America Beverages, which is we're nationally great, we're locally even better, right? And that's about empowering people at the local level to engage with communities, to understand our portfolio and the nuances it needs to play that are different in Miami, Florida, from, you know, Detroit, Michigan, Los Angeles, California, right? And we can't legislate from the center what's going to resonate in Miami versus Detroit versus LA. We need to empower people in those communities to do what's right. We need to give them the tools to make really smart and informed decisions, but then we've got to empower them to act on those decisions and execute on those decisions. My advice of what that could mean for Columbia Business School students and the broader community of Columbia Business School is there a business that needs the expertise, and if we meet them where they are, that could be the difference between, you know, continuing to operate as a small business or getting a broader reach, right? Being able to tell their story on a broader level. I would also encourage the students to not minimize the tables and rooms their classmates will be in the future, right? So this idea of being able to make local impact also sometimes doesn't happen until 10, 15 years after you're out of business school, and you can pick up the phone and call somebody or send an email or get on a Zoom and then have impact, because now you've got a classmate who was in your cluster, who was in a study group, that is now in a position to help you make local impact by virtue of where they are. And I've got a laundry list of those examples. Some of them are people coming to me saying, hey, can you help? And sometimes it's me going to others and offering up help.
Mm-hmm. Well, a couple of weeks ago, there was this amazing Caribbean food truck out there. And I think that they're kind of going to grow that. But a piece of what you're saying is it is also beyond the food truck. It is finding more businesses, finding more organizations in Harlem and investing. And I know the school does some work in that, but even broadening that. Now your perspective that you mentioned, I couldn't help think about you being a Morehouse man. Because you were, as a Morehouse man, you are embedded in a community of people that look like you in a lot of ways, just by the nature of going to an HBCU. And I'm curious to hear more about how that experience shaped who you are.
Yeah, anyone who knows anything about Morehouse knows, you know, when you show up as a 17, 18-year-old, in Dr. King's case, I think he started it at 15 or something like that. You can't experience that without being changed, right? I think some of it is just this idea of the unmitigating pursuit of excellence, right? Morehouse, Sharon knows this, holds a crown over the heads of all of its students, which it challenges us to grow tall enough to wear, right? It's not about a bar being lowered. It's about you need to step up. You need to raise your game. You need to level up to meet the demands and challenges that Morehouse men will put themselves in the way of, right? So you can't help but be changed going there. Not insignificant is the people who are closest to me that make up my village today, that keep me grounded and not lost in titles, accomplishments, and outwardly success. Those people are Morehouse folks, right? My family and I travel with a group of them every summer. My line brothers and I, connect all the time. The guys I played tennis with at Morehouse. So they also keep me grounded and connected to what's most important, and say, hey, we knew you before all these titles and all this outward success. I think one of the things that's often misunderstood about the HBCU experience is it's often viewed as lacking in diversity, right? The other way. I mean, you sit in a freshman class and cats from Dallas are different than cats from Detroit, are different from, our brothers who have come from, the continent of Africa. We had a number of cats from the Caribbean. We all see the world so differently. Our unique commonality is, yeah, we look the same, but our experience when we open our mouths is so different. And what I loved about Morehouse was it was a place where all of that was welcome, right? And we could have the rich dialogue and challenge one another. And I mean, some of the conversations you have in a dorm room, late on a Friday night when you decide to stay in the dorm room on a Friday night as opposed to engaging other activities in the city of Atlanta. I mean, those were robust, and they range from everything from music to culture to politics to economics to business and entrepreneurship. I mean, it was broad, it was vast, and like I said, it was diverse, right? Some of the folks there were, second, third generation running large corp family-owned businesses. Others were first generation college, right? And it was all welcome, right? And I think we invited some Morehouse students to this discussion because I firmly believe Morehouse, other HBCUs, really, not saying predominantly white institutions don't do the same, but HBCUs really prepare people for success at a place like Columbia. And I think the HBCU experience also will make Columbia a richer environment and a richer laboratory for people to learn and grow, during their 2 years at Columbia. So if anybody's questioning it after this answer, Morehouse is central and core to who I am.
Yes. Well, Morehouse makes me smile, whether it's the many people that I know who've gone there, but my mentor in grad school, when I was in college, is your president, David Thomas, and I adore him. He's my Michael Feiner for you. So he's doing amazing things, and I'm curious to hear about how you see your role in developing HBCUs or an institution like Morehouse. I mean, you mentioned that you were part of the class gift work at Columbia. What are you doing on that dimension at Morehouse?
At Morehouse? Yeah. Madupe, it's a really important question, and one I'm actually today proud to talk about. Had you asked me 2 years ago, I don't know that I would have the same pride in my story. And I do give Dr. Thomas a lot of credit for why I am now re-engaged in the college. I was there during the presidency of Dr. Walter Massey, Morehouse alum, really accomplished educator, board director across a number of different corporations. And I graduated, and I'll be honest, I kind of had the personal connections to people that I went to Morehouse with, I didn't necessarily view my role as helping to build an institution or playing my part in helping to continue to build an institution. My wife and I just made what I would call sizable commitment financially to Morehouse. We did that last fall, and that will provide scholarship for students going to Morehouse. I've also been in the lab thinking about how PepsiCo engages Morehouse a bit more, right? One of the stats Dr. Thomas pointed out was the number of Morehouse rising seniors who have never done a paid internship throughout their career at Morehouse. It's a staggering number. And what we all know is the pathway to full-time employment at companies like PepsiCo and Google and Goldman Sachs and you name the corporation is the internship, right? Can you interview and get the internship? Can you go and kick butt over a summer, whether that's the summer after your sophomore year, junior year, a combination of both? Then that's the on-the-job interview, and they say, okay, this person has the smarts, they fit culturally. So the second piece of what I hope to do is to find ways for PepsiCo to be more involved there, not just on the internship side, but also on the full-time side. And then finally is just continue to find every opportunity I have to expose Morehouse students to a range of options for them, right? So Robert Smith going to Morehouse commencement a couple of years ago and doing what he did opened people's eyes to Morehouse students specifically, eyes to I could go and lead in private equity and build an unbelievable business. The work of Walter Massey to say, hey, you can go and lead in the university system in California or Chicago, or be chair of the board of Bank of America. That opens people's eyes. Hopefully at some point, or even now, people look at my career and say, you know what, I could go and have a really successful corporate career in the CPG space. Jason Blake did it. So it's continuing to find ways to provide opportunities for exposure, because once people see it, right, they can create their own path, because now the light bulb's gone off that the path has been blazed, or they see someone has blazed the path and they're going to then go and blaze their own path to whatever success and meaning they deem to be successful. So that's kind of the 3-point plan I've got. I put it in an email to Dr. Thomas. He was happy, specifically as he continues to raise funds with the financial commitment we made, but also understanding how important things like internships and full-time jobs are for students matriculating at Morehouse.
And he's going to hold you to it. He doesn't mess around. He does not mess around. That's amazing. And I just think that philanthropy on so many different levels that supports our community is critical. And I think you probably heard that Robert Smith also established an HBCU scholarship fund at CBS too for students who attended HBCUs. So we look forward to the Jason Blake fund for students who whatever in the future. Yay!
Was that did Sharon plant that?
That just came to my mind.
Yeah, so can I just make a point though, because sometimes, and what Robert Smith is doing in every corner of this country is amazing. What I think is important for people to take away is he is unapologetic about the contribution he's going to make. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And all of us have a contribution to make. We have to have the confidence, the courage, and the conviction to stand on the contribution we're making being meaningful. Sometimes we feel like, well, my number's not as big as this person's number, therefore it's not as significant. That's not true. That it requires all, right, to chip in. I think is Princeton have the highest percentage of alumni giving to the school, well over 95%. I think it's 98%. But that's everything from a buck to a single share of stock on up to the biggest of big gifts, right? But it's about everyone participating and everybody showing a level of commitment to the institution moving forward. And sometimes, and I've had these conversations candidly with very good friends of mine, like we view it as it's a measuring of who's doing the most, and really we need everybody to do what they can.
Yep, I absolutely agree. It's about participation, not necessarily the number. And participation in your time, in your energy, and that changes over time. So I am with you on that. As we wrap up, I wonder if you had any other takeaways, one additional takeaway. We just talked about an important one with donation. Anything you want people to leave here remembering?
I would tell you, the relationships you build in business school will serve you over time. Make deposits now. They may not pay off for a while. But then also, I'm going to bring it back to where we started, which is we are part of the American business story, and we need to own that, embrace that, and forge new paths, right? Everyone who's on this call is here, either a current student at Columbia. I think there might even be some alum of Columbia and some future Columbia Business School students. We're all here because we earned our spot, and own that and wear it as an honor and a privilege to go and forge new paths and own your space. We got to own our space in every facet of what that means.
Okay, so 2 more questions that are more fun. You said tennis, Djokovic, Nadal, or Federer. Who are you? Who's your first?
Oh my gosh, we need to extend by 5 minutes. It was Djokovic before his recent
Australian Open situation.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Which now he's saying he's not, if there's any mandates in any Grand Slams, he's not playing, and I'm disappointed at that.
I'm sorry, I'm a Federer person, so whatever. And
greatest of all time.
My last question for you is, each of us has our own kind of private thoughts, an alter ego, the kind of person you wouldn't have been if you had not climbed to the top at Pepsi and all you're doing now. Kind of, if you said, forget this corporate stuff, I'm doing X, what would that be?
Ooh. I probably would be in politics somewhere.
Okay, you all heard it here. You all heard it here. I didn't know if you were going to say maybe, go back into tennis, being a pro again or whatever. Jason,
no.
Thank you so much for taking this time. Honestly, so many nuggets. I mean, run to the challenge, meet the demand of the crown. Make sure. I mean, you just really killed it in terms of the insights. And so, thank you for your precious time. It's valuable. And thank you to our audience for joining us today for this special, special moment.
Modupe, thank you so much. Thanks everybody for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Of course. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason, for an amazing conversation.